Inside the velvet-lined walls of Crockford's Club, London's oldest and most exclusive gambling den, the air in August 2012 was strangely still. This is not a place for the rowdy or the merely lucky. It is a sanctuary for the world's 0.1%. It is a place where kings, oil tycoons, and billionaires come to test their strength against the house. But during this particular multi-day session, the house was bleeding out in a way it had never experienced in nearly 2 centuries of operation. A private baccarat table in the Gold Room had just finished a marathon series of sessions that left the staff in a state of quiet shock. On the green felt, the cards were cleared, and the dealer's hands were clearly unsteady. The result of those nights, £7.7 million. That is roughly $12 million USD, won in a single visit to a game that is mathematically designed to be unbeatable. The casino's executive team had already processed the first paperwork for the payout. The wire transfer was being authorized for the remaining balance. But as the sun rose over Mayfair, a security chief staring at the high-definition monitors in the basement felt a pit in his stomach. He was looking for something impossible. He rewound the footage, frame by frame, hour by hour. He looked for hidden cameras in the players' sleeves. He found none. He checked for marked decks using every infrared filter and light spectrum available to modern surveillance. The cards appeared standard. He looked for bribed dealers or complex signaling from a team hidden in the back. The staff, however, was perfect, checked through decades of service. The man sitting at that table, Phil Ivey, had not touched a single card during the entire game. He had not used a digital gadget, a hidden prism, or a concealed transmitter. In fact, he had been entirely transparent about his method, looking the dealer in the eye and giving specific instructions on how to handle the deck. And the dealer, believing they were simply helping the strange whims of a world-class high roller, had agreed with a smile. But here is the reality that terrified the global casino industry. The cameras had recorded every single second of the heist, and yet they still could not see the crime, because the advantage wasn't in what Ivey did, it was in what he saw. Over the course of the next several years, the gambling world would learn how the greatest poker player of his generation used a microscopic printing flaw, a difference of less than 0.25 millimeters on the back of a card, and a dealer's own politeness to turn a game of pure chance into a predictable machine. Ivey and his partner Kelly Sun had identified a physical vulnerability in the very tools the casino relied upon for its security. By the time they reached the London sessions, they had already taken the Borgata in Atlantic City for nearly $9.6 million. Across 2 continents and 4 months, they had extracted approximately $22 million from the most sophisticated security systems on Earth. The most insane part of the entire saga was Ivey's own behavior. He never denied the technique. He claimed from the beginning that what he was doing was advantage play, the highest form of gambling skill. He believed he was simply better at the game than the house was, exploiting their failure to protect their own equipment. This is the story of the man who challenged the billion-dollar institutions of the gambling world using nothing but his eyes, a partner with a grudge, and a deck of purple cards that weren't as perfect as they seemed. To understand how you outmaneuver a casino legally, you have to understand the man the industry calls the Tiger Woods of poker. Phil Ivey was never your average gambler. By 2012, he was a living legend, holding 10 World Series of poker bracelets, a feat that placed him among the greatest to ever play the game. His tournament earnings at that point were estimated to be around $21 million, though his true net worth was lifted by secretive, high-stakes cash games in Macau and Las Vegas. But for a man with Ivey's drive, poker had a ceiling. Poker is a game of skill played against other people. Ivey wanted something bigger. He wanted to play against the house itself and win. Ivey started at the absolute bottom of the gambling world. In the mid-1990s, he was known as No Home Jerome, a teenager in Atlantic City with a fake ID, grinding $500 games just to pay for a bus ticket back to New Jersey. He spent years in the shadows of the Taj Mahal and the Borgata, watching the way cards move, the way dealers shuffle, and the way the house always finds a way to win. He noticed that the casinos weren't winning because they were smarter. They were winning because the math was rigged in their favor by design. He spent a decade as an underpaid expert, watching whales lose $10 million in a weekend and realizing that the system had a physical blind spot. Ivey has what some call a biological computer for a brain, specifically a visual memory that borders on the supernatural. He can remember the sequence of an entire deck after seeing it once, but his real skill wasn't just memory, it was observation. One night, sitting at a private high-limit table, Ivey's eyes locked onto the back of a card. Most people see a pattern of diamonds or circles. Ivey saw a map. He noticed that the full bleed patterns on the backs of the cards, the detailed designs that run all the way to the edge, weren't perfectly even. On certain cards, the pattern on the left edge was cut slightly differently than the pattern on the right. We are talking about a half-millimeter difference. To the naked eye, it's invisible. To Phil Ivey, it was a glowing neon sign. He realized that the machines that cut these cards aren't perfect. If he could recognize the difference between a high card and a low card from the back, the game of baccarat would no longer be a gamble. It would be a job. But he needed someone who understood the physical defects of the cards even better than he did. Enter Chung Yin, Kelly's son. Sun was not just a gambler. She was a woman who had been hardened by the system. Born into a wealthy family in northern China, she had experienced the heights of luxury before a series of events led to a life-changing incident in Las Vegas. Years prior to meeting Ivey, Sun had been jailed for 3 weeks over a gambling debt, a $100,000 marker she had signed for a friend who failed to pay. While sitting in that cell, she didn't pray for mercy. She focused her intellect on a way to get even. She spent thousands of hours studying the manufacturing defects of playing card companies like Gamako. She became the queen of sorts. She could spot a 0.3mm printing offset from 6 feet away. Most people would take that knowledge, win $50,000 and disappear into the night. Not Ivey and Sun. They decided to go for the throat, aiming to take over $20 million from major casinos in under 90 days. The transition from a poker professional to a baccarat advantage player required a complete shift in mindset. In poker, you exploit human emotion and mathematical probability against other players. In baccarat, you exploit physical reality against the house. Ivey realized that the casino's greatest strength, their reliance on standardized, high-quality equipment, was also their greatest vulnerability. If the equipment was flawed, the entire house edge collapsed. He didn't need to cheat the dealer. He just needed to understand the cards better than the manufacturer did. This wasn't about luck. It was about turning a casino into a laboratory and the cards into data. The game was baccarat, specifically the version known as Punto Banco. In this game, the players traditionally have zero control over the cards. You bet on the player or the banker, and the dealer does everything according to a rigid set of rules. It is a game of pure, blind chance, or so the casinos believed. Casino playing cards are printed in massive sheets and then cut by machines, because the pattern goes all the way to the edge, what printers call full bleed. If the blade is off by even a fraction of a hair, the left side of the card will have a different cut than the right side. In baccarat, the most important cards are the 6, 7, 8, and 9. If you know that one of these is coming next, the house edge is erased, replaced by a massive player advantage. Ivey and Sun developed a 4-step execution plan that used the casino's own rules against them. First, they needed the superstitious setup. Ivey would contact the casino and offer to play for $100,000 per hand. In exchange for such high-stakes action, he had strange requests. He demanded a private pit, a Mandarin-speaking dealer, and a specific brand of purple Jamako cards. The choice of purple was not random. That specific batch of cards had the most noticeable printing flaws. Second came the rotation. As the cards were dealt face-up during the early part of the session, Kelly's son would communicate with the dealer in Mandarin. She would ask the dealer to rotate the high-value cards, the 7s, 8s, and 9s, 180 degrees before putting them back into the discard pile, claiming it was for good luck. The dealer, wanting to keep a high roller happy, would rotate the cards as requested. The third step was the use of the automatic shuffler. This is the key to the entire strategy. A manual strip shuffle by a human dealer flips cards around randomly, ruining the direction, but an automatic shuffler, like the ones used in most high-stakes pits, keeps the direction of the cards exactly as they were put in. It mixes the order, but not the direction of the cards. Finally, they had the identification. The next time those cards came out of the shoe, they were face down. To the dealer, they were just identical purple cards. To Ivey and Sun, the cards were sorted. Full diamonds on the left edge meant it was a high card. Half diamonds meant it was a low card. They didn't just walk into London and execute this immediately. They perfected the strategy first at the Borgata in Atlantic City over 4 separate sessions in 2012. Initially, they had to slow the game down, acting confused or asking the dealer to repeat actions to ensure they could see the edges clearly. They realized that as long as the casino didn't change the deck, they could play for days with a mathematical certainty of winning. Ivey used specific purple Gemico cards with a 0.5mm offset in the diamond pattern, giving him a 6.8% advantage in a game where the house usually wins by a 1.06% margin. Success wasn't a matter of luck, it was a matter of counting interruptions in the printing pattern. To visualize the power of this method, imagine a puzzle where every piece looks identical to the untrained eye. If all the pieces are blue, the puzzle is impossible. But if you realize that the pieces with slightly rounded edges always go on the bottom, the puzzle is solved. Ivey didn't need to know every card in the deck, he only needed to know when a 7, 8, or 9 was coming. In baccarat, those cards determine who wins the majority of the time. By identifying those power cards, Ivey effectively removed the house edge and replaced it with a player edge that was 6 times stronger than what the casino normally enjoys. He had turned the world's most exclusive gambling halls into personal ATMs. During the August 2012 session at Crockford's, things did not start well for Phil Ivey. He actually began the game losing nearly $500,000. To any other gambler, losing £500,000 would feel like a total disaster. But for Ivey and Kelly's son, this was just part of the plan. They were in the sorting phase. During these first few hours, they weren't really trying to win big yet. They were busy preparing the deck. Every time a power card like a 7, 8, or 9 appeared on the table, Kelly would speak to the dealer in Mandarin. She asked the dealer to turn the card a certain way before putting it back, pretending it was just a weird habit for good luck. The casino bosses watched everything from a back room filled with screens. They probably smiled when they saw Ivey losing so much money. They thought they had the world's greatest poker player trapped in a game where he had no control. But Ivey stayed calm. His heart rate didn't go up, and he didn't look worried at all. He knew that the cards in the discard pile were being lined up like soldiers getting ready for a big fight. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Once the deck was fully sorted, the game changed instantly. The cards were now a weapon. Ivey suddenly raised his bets to the highest amount allowed, £150,000 for every single hand. The feeling in the room shifted from a relaxed, expensive hangout to a place of clear focus. Every move Ivey made was careful and planned. The dealer would slide a card across the table, face down. To everyone else, it was just a purple card. But Ivey would look at the back and see a full diamond pattern on the edge. That meant a high card was coming. He would bet on the player and win. Then he would see a half diamond, which meant a low card. He would bet on the banker and win again. He won 5 hands in a row, then 10. The pile of chips on the table grew until it looked like a small mountain. By the time the session ended, Ivey had turned his huge loss into a £7.7 million profit. He stood up, shook hands, and politely asked for his money to be sent to his bank. He didn't brag or act tough. He was professional and quiet. He walked out into the cool London night, knowing he had pulled off a perfect plan. But behind him, the casino was starting to panic. A win that big is impossible to ignore. Most people lose millions at that level. They almost never win it. The leaders of the casino held an emergency meeting and stopped the money transfer. They began a deep check of everything. They looked at the cards under microscopes to see if they were marked with ink or scratches, but they found nothing. Then they watched the security tapes. They noticed the way Kelly's son talked to the dealer and the way the cards were always turned. They realized the automatic shuffling machine was like a getaway car, because it kept the cards facing the same way. They realized Ivey hadn't beaten the game. He had beaten the equipment they used. They called their lawyers and told Ivey they weren't going to pay. They called it cheating. But Ivey didn't run away. Instead, he did something very bold. He sued the casino. He argued that since he never touched the cards and used their own equipment, he followed all the rules. Phil Ivey's biggest mistake wasn't the way he played, it was how much he won. If he had only taken a few $100,000, the casinos probably would have paid him and just asked him never to come back. But when he took over $20 million across 2 different continents, he forced the casinos to fight back. They couldn't afford to look that bad in public. In the United Kingdom, Ivey's case went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was a huge moment for the gambling world. In 2017, the judges made a decision that changed everything. They ruled that what Ivey did counted as cheating under the law. The most interesting part was that the judges said he didn't have to be dishonest to be a cheater. They decided that simply creating an unfair advantage by messing with the game's randomness was enough to break the rules. This ruling was like a dagger to Ivey's career. Crockford's was allowed to keep his £7.7 million winnings. Soon after, the Borgata Casino in America sued him too. A judge ordered Ivey to pay back over $10.1 million that he had already won and spent. The legal fighting lasted for years. It got so bad that federal officers actually showed up at poker tournaments to take Ivey's winnings. In 2019, while he was playing in the World Series of Poker, they seized his prize money right there to help pay off his debt to the Borgata. It was a very public and embarrassing blow for a man who was used to being the biggest winner in the room. Finally, in 2020, after 8 years of fighting in court, Ivey and the casino reached a private agreement to end the battle. Even though Ivey was never sent to jail, his days of winning big at baccarat were over. The entire gambling industry changed because of him. Every major casino in the world fixed their machines. Now shuffling machines have a random turn rule, where they automatically spin the cards around so they can't be sorted. The companies that make the cards also had to change their rules to make sure the patterns on the back are perfectly even. Today, people still argue about whether Phil Ivey was a genius or a cheat. He didn't use a computer or a bribe. He just used his eyes to see a tiny flaw that millions of people had missed for years. He proved that even the most expensive systems in the world have weak spots. He might have lost the money in the end, but he kept his place in history. He showed that for one brief moment, a single person could be smarter than a billion-dollar system. He remains a legend, a ghost in the machine that still makes casino bosses nervous whenever a player looks just a little too closely at the back of a card.